In the world of American classic cars, everyone talks about V8 engines, the 289, 302, 351, or 428 Cobra Jet as the ultimate icons. But few know that a humble inline-6 engine, quiet and reliable, quietly powered millions of Ford vehicles over 2 decades. It didn't roar, didn't make headlines, and never starred in drag races. But if you needed an engine that could start after sitting in a barn for 10 years, haul your family through the desert without complaint, this was the one. This was the Ford 250 Inline-6. Overshadowed by its flashy V8 siblings, but so trustworthy that many still believe Ford should have kept it around longer. So why did such a reliable, efficient, and widely used engine get mercilessly killed off by Ford? Today, we uncover the shocking truth behind the Ford 250, the forgotten engine that could have been a legend. In the late 1960s, Ford stood at a major crossroads. V8 engines were still the ultimate weapons in the horsepower wars. But consumers were beginning to worry about gas prices, vehicle weight, and everyday practicality. The older 144 and 170 i6 engines were too weak for the increasingly larger cars. Meanwhile, the 240 and 300 i6s were too heavy and mostly intended for trucks. Ford needed a middle ground, an engine that was smooth, fuel-efficient, yet still powerful enough to cruise the highway. So in 1969, Ford introduced the 250 cubic inch, 4.1-liter Inline-6, a bridge between the smaller 206 and the more popular V8s. Its mission was clear: power compact models like the Mustang, Maverick, Falcon, and even light-duty pickups. An engine that could do it all without draining your wallet at the pump. But even though it was designed as the all-purpose solution, the Ford 250 never truly got its moment in the spotlight. The Ford 250 is a textbook example of 1960s to 70s practical engineering. No frills, no flash, just durability, easy maintenance, and smooth, clockwork-like operation. It's an inline-6 engine displacing 250 cubic inches, or about 4.1 liters, featuring a traditional overhead valve design with a single camshaft located inside the block. Compression ratios ranged from 8.0 to 9.0 to 1, paired with single or dual-barrel carburetors, producing 91 to 120 horsepower and 190 to 220 pound-feet of torque. One of its key features was the use of 7 main bearings on the crankshaft, offering great durability and long-term reliability. Ford later introduced an integral intake manifold head, a cost-cutting measure where the intake was cast directly into the cylinder head. While cheaper to produce, it became controversial. If it cracked or wore out, you had to replace the entire head, a costly repair. Compared to its main rival, the Chevrolet 250Y6, Ford's version was more compact and lighter, but less modification-friendly. Chevy's separate intake made upgrades like carb swaps, EFI, or turbocharging easier. Ford's setup prioritized simplicity and long-term dependability. In other words, the Ford 250 wasn't made to race. It was made to never die. That's why it earned the title, the most dependable companion, in low-trim Mustangs, fuel-saving Mavericks, and even lightweight pickups throughout the 1970s. And it was this quiet nature that made the Ford 250 so special. It didn't need massive horsepower or roaring exhaust notes, because its place wasn't on the racetrack, but in the daily journeys of everyday Americans. From the late 1960s to the early 1980s, the Ford 250 powered countless everyday vehicles, base model Mustangs, Mavericks, Granadas, Fairmonts, Zephyrs, and even light-duty trucks, like the F-100 F-150. In these vehicles, the Ford 250 didn't offer excitement. It offered peace of mind. You could drive to work every day, take your family out on the weekends, tow a small trailer, and almost never worry about mechanical issues. And then, while the cars around it started aging and breaking down, the 250 just kept running. No complaints, no drama, just quiet reliability. Many owners said the same thing. "I never even had to open the hood." A simple sentence, yet it speaks volumes about the trust placed in this engine. But no engine is perfect. Despite its durability and reliability, the Ford 250 had technical flaws, and these quietly held it back from reaching its full potential. First was weight. While more compact than the 300 i6, the Ford 250 was still quite heavy compared to the 4 cylinders and V6s that came later. Cars with the 250 often suffered from poor front-to-rear weight balance, especially smaller models like the Mustang or Falcon. Second was low horsepower. With output ranging from 91 to 120 horsepower, the 250 was easily outclassed by compact V8s like the 289 or 302. Drivers wanting more punch often skipped upgrades and swapped to a V8 instead. Another controversial issue was the integral cylinder head. Though cheaper to produce, it meant that if the intake cracked or failed, you had to replace the entire head. That pushed repair costs up significantly. Finally, the 250 wasn't tuner-friendly. Unlike the Chevy 250 or Mopar Slant 6, performance upgrades for the Ford 250 required custom work. There were few aftermarket options and limited bolt-on kits available. None of this made it a bad engine, but it kept it from rising beyond its role as a basic workhorse. And sadly, Ford never gave it a real shot to do more. The Ford 250 wasn't rejected by the market, it wasn't plagued by scandal or defects. So what led to its demise? The answer lies within Ford's own strategy. Entering the early 1980s, the American auto industry faced a double crisis: increasingly strict emissions regulations and fierce competition from Japanese imports. Ford had to evolve fast. Instead of upgrading the 250 to meet new standards, Ford chose the easier path: replace it entirely with lighter, more modern engines. First came the 4-cylinder Lima Pinto engines, followed by V6s like the 2.8-liter Cologne, 3.8-liter Essex, and later the 3.0-liter Vulcan. The 250 was slowly removed from Ford's lineup. In 1983, US production ended. No farewell, no special edition. It simply disappeared. Ironically, while Ford walked away, the engine lived on in Australia and South America for nearly a decade, proving it still had life left in it. The big question remains, was Ford too hasty? Did they abandon an engine that, with just a little more investment, could have gone much, much further? Although Ford quietly discontinued it, the Ford 250 never truly disappeared. It lives on, in backyard garages, in online communities, and in the hearts of mechanics who value simplicity and durability. Today, a small but passionate community continues to preserve and restore vehicles powered by the Ford 250. From i6 Mustangs, Falcons, and Mavericks to classic pickups, all are being brought back to life by those who refuse to let this engine be forgotten. Forums like Ford 6 Performance, Vintage Inline, and dedicated Facebook groups remain active, sharing blueprints, EFI swap tips, and even turbo kits tailored to the Ford 250. Notably, Aftermarket aluminum heads have solved the integral intake flaw, making the 250 a more viable performance platform than ever for those seeking both classic charm and modern upgrades. In a world of increasingly complex cars, the Ford 250 has become a symbol of trusted simplicity. Today, the Ford 250 is more than just an engine. It's a symbol of old-school values being rediscovered in a modern world. And to truly understand its place, we need to look at its more famous sibling, the Ford 300. Both were inline-6 engines, yet while the Ford 250 quietly served in passenger cars, the Ford 300 became a legend in the truck world. Comparing these two siblings reveals much about how Ford positioned each machine. The Ford 300, with its 4.9-liter displacement, was famous for its heavy-duty performance, abundant low-end torque, and near-indestructible durability. It powered F-Series trucks, Econolines, and even industrial equipment, and remained in production until 1996. In contrast, the Ford 250 topped out at 4.1 liters, delivered modest horsepower, but was lighter and better suited for smaller vehicles, Mustangs, Mavericks, Fairmonts. It didn't have the brute strength of the 300, but offered agility, economy, and everyday usability. The key difference: Ford kept investing in the 300 for nearly 3 decades, while the 250 was phased out early, as if it was never given the chance to prove itself. But if the 300 was the muscle-bound worker, then the 250 was the quiet companion. Soft-spoken, yet always there when needed. Different missions, equal respect. The Ford 250 Inline-6 was never a star. It didn't win awards, star in blockbuster films, or fetch millions at auctions. But for millions of Americans, it was the engine that kept life moving. It was the motor in their first car, the companion on the highway, the machine that never complained, never left them stranded. In a world increasingly obsessed with horsepower and high tech, maybe it's time we take a moment to remember the machines that simply did their job well. What do you think? Does the Ford 250 deserve a place in the Hall of Fame of the most reliable engines ever built? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If you believe this story deserves to be heard, like, share, and subscribe. And join us as we uncover more machines that almost changed history, but were hidden from the spotlight.